the ethics of war. So ladies and gentlemen, may I request Dr. Russell D'Souza, Director, Department of Education, Head Asia Pacific Region, and the International Chair in Bioethics, to kindly come for his oration. And may I request Professor Dr. Shyamlal Singla and Professor Dr. Rajbir Singh to kindly chair the session. So ladies and gentlemen, here we have the oration on the ethics of war by the man himself.
Good afternoon. I think you had good sumptuous lunch, and following which lactic acid must be pretty high. To keep it normal, we have a very eminent speaker. Doesn't need any introduction. We all know about him. Dr. D'Souza is going to talk on a very important subject, that is ethics in war. We know that most of the things are unethical, but to say so, there have to be some ethics in war also. So he is going to talk on that till he fixes his slides. I'll just take half a minute. Oh, it's already there. Thank you, sir. Welcome on the stage. It's all yours now, sir. And I may just add one line, since it's an oration to him, and in oration, we don't ask any questions. So all of you will make sure that there will be no questions asked. Whatever he will teach us, we'll take home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Singla. Thank you very much, both of you, for our co-chair and chair. Okay. So I move it like this, is it? All right. Welcome back to the post-lunch session. And I'm going to be doing this oration here on something that's very important. I'm sure it is here in India, but certainly in the West, in Europe and USA and indeed Australia, we are in some ways deeply involved with the current war. But it's a good time to look at what is the issues around the ethics of war. There is what. Before I start, does anyone here know about the ethics of war or the just war theory? Have you heard of it? Yes? Someone there, is it? No? All right. What I'm going to do is to tell you some of the things about the ethics of war and what's called, for a long time, wars and governments have used what's called the just war theory to justify a war when they approach it. And there are some requirements and so forth. But at the end, I want to put to you, I'm going to tell you this and then I want to say, can it be morally justified? Right? So we're going to give you the just war theory and then look at, so I'm going to try and cover this, okay? And all these areas and come to my conclusion will be, I want to see if I can justify is that there's a moral justification for war from an ethical perspective. Now the background to this is that for a long time, philosophers, ethicists, for centuries have been puzzled by war, and all of us can understand why, isn't it? Intuitively, we know that on ethical consideration, any war appears to be morally wrong because it's killing on a mass scale. So the premise of ethics pertaining to warfare is that war is, this is the prefix, that war is only waged as the last remaining alternative to an even worse atrocity. So, and this is the dilemma. So if the moral justification of going to war is to avoid an even greater atrocity or evil, then how can one can argue that you cannot inflict more harm than what you're trying to save or trying to stop. However, many argue that there are times when war is morally permissible and even at times obligatory. So this has been going on for a long time, and if you look back, it goes back to the Greeks and Romans, although in those civilizations neither of them behaved well in war. But the tradition comes back to the Christian tradition of war ethics. So it's developed by St. Augustine and later by Thomas Aquinas and others. But then further in the 1583 to 1645, Dutch philosophers and so forth brought out what's the rights of war and peace. And this, of course, was putting down the conditions for a just war that were accepted then and continue to be accepted by the governments, by the United Nations, and so forth. And of course, remembering that the purpose of war ethics is to help decide what is right or wrong, both for the individual, but importantly for countries, and of course, the importance is to contribute to debates on public policy and ultimately to government and individual actions. So for a long time, war ethics has been an important issue, particularly from the governments, the United Nations, and so forth. And we'll come back to some of those rules. War ethics also leads to the creation of formal codes of war. For example, the Hague Convention, the Geneva Convention, were all based on, drafted out of the war ethics and the implementation of the rules of engagement for soldiers, and indeed the punishment of soldiers and others for war crimes, which we are hearing from time to time. Now, what is the just war theory? This has been there for 500 or more, thousands of years, which now, even to now, the United Nations and all follow that. So it's a well-accepted way of ethically assessing war. It's a well-accepted way of ethically assessing. There is to use the just war theory, and just war theory provides a framework that's useful both for individuals and political groups to use for their discussions of possible wars. But remember that this theory was never intended to justify wars, but rather to prevent them by showing that going to war, except in very limited circumstances, is wrong, and that motivates the states to find other ways of resolving their conflicts. So that was how this came up. Just war theory considers, one, the reason for going to war, otherwise called jus ad bellum. And then the second part of it is the conduct of war, just in bello. So how is war? We in India have had a couple of wars in my time when I was here, certainly. But so it's important that we get an opportunity to, particularly in the current time, to review this. The distinction is important between going to war and then the conduct of war. A war might be ethical, but the means unethical. For instance, using torture, chemicals, and the current debate is about the use of drones. All this is an example. But once a war is completed, then we have another law, part of the just war theory, where we need to transition from a state of war to a state of peace. This is called just post bello. Is a new area of just war theory aimed at identifying the principles for the return to normalcy after a war is over. So we talked about just ad bellum. This is when political leaders are trying to decide whether to go to war or not. Then just war theory is brought in, and it requires to test their decision. The governments are required to test their decision by applying these principles. Is it for a just cause? That's the first principle. Is this war for a just cause? This requires war only to be used in response to serious wrongs. And of course, what is the example of that? Self-defense is probably the first. And or coming to the defense of another innocent nation is also seen as a just cause by many. The second is, so what is it? Is it a just cause? Is it with a right intention? So we're looking at, this requires the wartime political leaders, the wartime governments, to be solely motivated at a personal level by reasons that make a war just. That is, even if the war is waged in defense of another innocent country, leaders shouldn't resort to war because it will assist an election campaign, which we sometimes see, a secondary benefit. So these type of things are required. So just cause, just right intention, is it from a legitimate authority? Again, it's from who is it? The United Nations Security Council authorizing it? And does it have due proportionality? This is important, and of course, this requires to imagine what the world would look like if we neither did or didn't go to war. So, for a war to be just, the quality of peace resulting from the war needs to be superior to what it would have happened if no war took place. So that's called proportionality. And finally, is it the last resort? This says we should explore all other reasonable options before going to war. Negotiating, diplomacy, economic sanctions, and so on. And we've all been hearing about this in the recent times, the use of all this. So even with the principles of jus ad bellum, which is the principles that permit you to go to war, there are still ways that we can use, there are still reasons why the war might be unjust. So that's important to keep in mind. Now, jus in bello is the ethical principles that govern the way, once you go to war, how do you, the combat, there's the ethics there too, right? And that comes under what's called jus in bello. So there are some important things to be considered. Discrimination, this requires combatants only to attack legitimate targets. Civilians, medics, and aid workers cannot be the deliberate targets of military attack. So there is a need to discriminate between the targets. And of course, according to the principle of double effect, military attacks that kill some civilians is a side effect, may be permissible if they are necessary and proportional. So we got discrimination when you go into the field, into war. The ethics then requires proportionality. No intrinsically unethical means is an important principle, but it's also a principle that is debatable in the just war theory. Some theorists believe that there are actions that are always unjustifiable, whether or not they are used against the enemy combatants or another goals. Torture, shooting to maim, all these come under this unethical means. And the other one is following orders, is an important issue. And we are actually having a proper issue in Australia where the war in Afghan it's now, they're looking at war crimes, and many of them have been charged on some of these things that have happened in action. Following law orders is not a defense. If you, for example, if a combatant did an unethical issue and said it was under orders, that is not acceptable, and it's not a defense for war crimes. And that's important part of this. And of course, the third part, which is not really, it is an addition, is what is called just post bello. It is the ethics that govern the transition from war to peace. Okay, once the war is completed, the ethical requirements are steps are necessary to transition from a state of war to a state of peace. So just post-bello is of course an area that's new area that's been added to the war theory, just war theory. So what does it mean? There is a word called status quo ante bellum, that is a Latin term meaning the way things are before the war. They got to bring it back to what it was before the war. And basically rights, property, borders should be restored to how they were before the war broke out. Some suggest this is a problem because these can never be an exact condition which led to the war. Then punishment for war crimes, which we know happens, and we've seen it over many of the wars. Compensation of victims, okay, that's also part of the just war theory. And peace treaties need to be fair, just to all parties, including those who are guilty for war crimes or war occurring, even making the war happen. So, war ethics relates to what is called the just war theory. So the just war theory provides the basis for exercising ethical restraint in war. And without restraint, philosophers like 𝐐𝐮𝐢𝐧𝐭𝐞𝐬𝐬 argues there is no way to tell the difference between a warrior and a barbarian. So that's why they have this war theory, the ethics there, and that's what the UN and Security Council and so forth take place. Now they come out with, in the ethics of war, following the theory of the just war theory, there must be 6 conditions for a just war. A just war, even if we assume for a moment that such a thing even exists, because you and me and many of us, we might not ever believe that a war can be morally acceptable or ethically right? So even if we do have that, it's generally thought to fulfill 6 criteria. And what are those 6 criteria? A just cause, it must have the right intention, there must also be reasonable chances to succeed, benefits proportional to losses, and war must be seen as the last resort after every other option is explored. And war can only be declared by a legitimate authority, and we'll look at that again. Who is the legitimate authority and what do we know about that? So 6 conditions, and this is what has been accepted, this is what governments, UN and so forth work on. So how do we apply these principles? And I wanted to give you the ethics of war, the just war, and I want to see what do I justify? Can it be morally justified, even though we've got this ethics? And then so for doing that, I want to apply 2003 US-led invasion of Iraq. The just war principles are used to address the question of whether the war lacked legitimate authority without UN resolution, right? This is when you apply the ethics of this, they looked at what is the legitimate authority. So the legitimate authority is an issue in all conflicts, including those considered to be acts of insurgency and terrorism. Example, uprisings since 2011, what they loosely call the Arab Spring. Again, the debate about supporting or arming the rebels in Syria. Who's considered a legitimate authority? So this thing becomes a big issue, because does legitimate authority make sense anymore? Because that's one of the conditions. So when we examine what has happened, we see that it really, while it's there in theory, when we apply it to what we have seen, it doesn't seem to hold good. The next one is applying the principle of just causes. Now to do that is very difficult and also problematic. An example is self-defense is widely recognized and is certainly self-defense is accepted as a United Nations Charter which grants states the right to defend themselves, okay? However, other just causes are more difficult to defend, particularly when we talk of the controversial humanitarian interventions, even though it is sometimes seen as obligatory. And often it's the most ethical reason to go to war. When we examine this, this of course, when you look at the NATO intervened in Kosovo in '99. But then there are instances where humanitarian disasters, we all know of the disaster in the Rwanda that no one bothered about and led to a genocide. So again, we're trying to see how these principles really work. And from evidence, all criteria appear to be problematic. All these ethics of war, which we work on, which the United Nations are working on, and all governments are working on, using as the basis, we seem to think, my thoughts are that all these criteria are problematic and indeed hard to justify. The principle of right intention, again, everyone would agree that when you take the Iraq war, the intention was quite different from the real motives. And the principle of proportionality is another debate that keeps going on, because when you look at the use of drones, where on one side no risk to life, on the other side risk to many, including civilians, and that's taking place. So when battles are fought in villages and homes by those with no uniforms, how can this discrimination principle really be upheld and respected? And of course, all this tells us, and I'll try to, I'll cut short, they want to finish quickly, but I give you the principles, the just war theory, the 3 parts of the just war, okay, and then 6 criteria which the UN and Security Council use. And what we see, when I try to justify that, we really can't find it to be easily identifiable and usable. So what we think is the character of war from when all this started has changed. Okay, war is, and it's changing fast. So the ethics of war that we are still using, the just war theory, needs to keep pace with these changes. When this came in, there were no drones fighting, there was no all these issues. So for discussion, the war ethics principle might need now a revision. And of course, the fundamental ethical issues have not changed. Hence, it is still the cause that a sense of war, even though we have the ethics, the war ethics, the just war theory, it still appears to be inherently unethical to have a war. From all the evidence that I've been able to show, even applying those principles to the recent wars, it still shows to be unethical. To be justified, significant and ethical reasons are required, and although we might consider just war theory imperfect, it happens to be the only thing that the governments and the UN are using. So we need to make a change, and I told you that this talk was to look at the war ethics and to ask the question, after applying the war ethics, can it be morally justified? That's what I set out to do in this oration, to use the war ethics of war in the contemporary situation we're in, and then apply it, see the past, and then come to a justification. Can it be morally acceptable? So there's a long-standing tradition in Western cultures of differentiating between just and unjust wars. Although these theories were developed many, many years ago, most explicit references to war theory today tend to come from the Western countries, because if you look at the 4 Security Council members, they're all very much influenced by this just war theory. And of course, implicit reference to it can only be found widely because the way in which it has become incorporated into the Western political thought. So using this argument, I now put together and come to the final conclusion that I've shown to all of you that the just war theory and the war ethics of war shown from the case I make today continues to be unethical and morally unjustified. Thank you very much for that listening to me. Thank you.
So I think we should focus more on the conclusion part. War and ethics are antithesis to each other. And whenever we are committing some unethical behavior, then only you need to justify it. Being your psychiatrist, Professor Russell knows it very well. And I think that although we have, this is all from the Western, experiences, and the United Nations and the League, the Hague, all are the byproduct of the war themselves.
Yes.
And of course, if they want to sustain, they have yet to come out with the just theory of war and to somehow endorse it. But certainly in Eastern world, we have a different kind of thinking. As you also know that we have Ramayana and Mahabharata, and they know that that was the last alternative, and everything has been tried, and then only it was a war. And but once the Lord says that the war is your dharma, it's your karma. Sometimes it happens, but yet still there may be different thoughts. War is war, and it is always unethical. I endorse to this viewpoint. Thank you very much.
I think that's why I brought this up, that this is a byproduct of the Western, which is now, of course, what the world accepts. But there is an Eastern way of thinking too, and you rightly gave the war in the Mahabharata and so forth, where there is ethics there too, you should see, and so maybe we need to. Yes. Exactly. Anyway, thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much, sir. It was indeed a wonderful oration. And now may I request the Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, to kindly come and join the chairpersons in felicitating our Honorable Chief Guest with an Oration Award. Sir, if you would like to read out.
So I read this, oration citation from Sri Guru Gobind Singh Tricentenary University Oration Award, the UNESCO Bioethics Unit of SGT University, and Organizing Committee of International Seminar on Contemporary Bioethical Issues, Quintessential Ethics 2022, have great pleasure and feel honored in awarding the oration to Professor Russell Franco D'Souza, Chair and Head of the Asia Pacific Division of the UNESCO Chair in Bioethics, University of Haifa, Directorate of the Asia Pacific Division and Department of Education in Melbourne, Australia, on 13th August 2022, SGT University, Gurugram, Haryana, India. This oration is awarded to Dr. Russell for his dedicated services in the field of bioethics. Dr. Russell has established multiple bioethics units in multiple medical institutions across the nation and internationally, including SGT. He has conducted numerous training programs for faculty in the field of bioethics. He is the editor of the major bioethics textbooks and the bioethics journal from the International Chair. He has been instrumental in the introduction of the bioethics curriculum to the medical and health science courses throughout India and the Asia Pacific region. In addition to his contribution in the field of bioethics, Dr. Russell has been Director of Clinical Trials in the field of psychiatry and behavioral sciences, and he has immensely contributed to the growth of organizational psychological medicine. In recognition of his individual achievements and contribution in bioethics and humanity, and having delivered, the SGT Guru Gobind Singh Tricentenary University put this oration to Professor Russell. Signed by the Registrar, Vice Chancellor, Organizing Chairperson, and Organizing Secretary.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we hear it loud for the Oration Award presented to the Honorable Chief Guest and the certificate of appreciation. Thank you so much, sir. It was a treat listening to you. We wish we had more time. And now we proceed to our next talk. I request the interns to kindly take over. And may I request all our speakers to kindly honor time. We are really running short of time. So we would really appreciate if you could just squeeze in the talks to 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Russell, for accepting the oration. We are really honored. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Moving on, we now welcome our next panel. We welcome our chairperson, Dr. Wahida Khan ma'am, advisor, SGT University. We are privileged to welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Colonel Derek D'Souza, Director, Student Development and Training, Dr. D.Y. Patil Vidyapeeth, Pune. May we welcome you, sir. Sir will be addressing us on the topic, The Wounded Healer, Understanding Vulnerability in the Healthcare Professionals. Over to you, sir.
No, was it saved to the desktop? Because there's a video which is linked to the whole. Yeah, yeah, got it.
Okay, very good afternoon. I hope I'm audible at the back. Okay, I know this is the most difficult time. Not only are you all vulnerable, I'm more vulnerable. I shouldn't go to sleep. Otherwise, then there'll be a problem. So I hope not only you all remain awake, I also remain awake, which is difficult after having such a wonderful lunch. And thank you for all the wonderful arrangements. It's really an honor and privilege to be allowed to speak in such a wonderful auditorium and in such an august gathering. So I know it's difficult and we are running short of time, but can we play a quick game? Yes. I don't hear you. Okay, very simple. Only if I say the word Simon says and then tell you to do something, you will do it. Alright? If I don't use the word Simon says, you don't do it. Are we clear? Still can't. Come on, SGT. Where's the Josh? Okay. So can we please stand up? I don't think you can hear me. I think I need another mic. Okay, Simon says stand up. Simon says raise your right hand. Simon says raise your left hand. Now reach for the ceiling. Reach for the ceiling. Higher. 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 No one's reaching for the ceiling. Okay, Simon says stretch. On your toes. On your toes, higher. Okay, chalo, I think now I know. You're all awake, I am also awake. So, I never said sit down. I don't think, maybe I should start speaking Punjabi. I do speak a little, but okay. Thank you. Thank you everyone. Yes, Simon says sit down. Simon says please don't go to sleep. And Simon says, some of you keep me awake. Okay. Yes, let's jump into our topic and thank you for all the cooperation, especially Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, Asta Madam and the entire team. I know there are so many people working behind the scenes, but we've been comfortable, so thank you for that. Coming to our topic for today, if you go and Google about the wounded healer, classically, this comes in the context of psychiatry, psychoanalysis, and it was one of the principles that was put forward very famously by Carl Jung. And what he went on to say was that unless you experience pain, you experience hurt, you experience addiction, you experience problems in your own life, you cannot reach out to others. But we are not going to talk about that because that's an entire different speciality. What I would like to address is currently how each one of us, in trying to heal the others, in trying to be good healthcare professionals, we forget the fact that we are also human beings. Our students are also human beings. Each other that we are sitting here in this hall, and if you just look left and right, each one of us do get wounded. And vulnerability itself comes from the Latin vulnere, which means to wound, to hurt. And then you get pain. So this is some of the issues that we are going to address today. And if I may have your cooperation, if we could, not part of the game, but seriously, if we could just stand up and keep a moment silence for all our sisters, brothers that we've lost in the past 2 years. Let's give them a moment of respect, 1 moment of silence, please. Yes, thank you for that. So let's remember all those who gave their lives literally for humankind. And this is what we have. Again, they say that all of us who are here as healthcare professionals have come here because somewhere during our development, we have faced pain. We have faced some trouble, again, going back to what I told you about Carl Jung. And that's why we come into the medical profession and continue to be in, and when I say medical, it means all the healthcare professionals. Let me be clear about that. But what happens is, from here you can see everyone is there, quite keen, listening to their professor, very keenly attending the lectures, wanting to do good. You always ask the first year students and they'll tell you, yes sir, we want to heal, we want to do service, we want to do good to mankind, and they're not giving Miss World type answers, they actually mean it. And here also, if I were to ask the students, the PGs, even some of our junior teachers, these are the answers you will get when very genuine. But what happens along the way is that once you start going on to your wards, once you start seeing what happens actually in the clinics, the way that patients are treated, the realities of life of patients are waiting, and like Dr. 𝐐𝐮𝐢𝐧𝐭𝐞𝐬𝐬 told us about the reality of even during a painful period as the pandemic, the entire healthcare professional let down the rest of the world. No names, but we know it happened. So you get frustrated. As they go higher, there's resignation. Then there's anger. And by the time you've completed your post-graduation and worse, there is not only acceptance, but this is where it becomes dangerous. Because we emulate it. We fall into the same bad habits that we hated when we were first-year students, and then we realize or we feel that there's no way out, and we continue to do much of the same thing. And this is called acculturation or traumatic de-idealization. And ladies and gentlemen, this is what our students go through. And then they don't know what to do. This is what our postgraduates go through when they see the ward. I still remember in the first days of the pandemic when we were suddenly given PPE kits and told, okay, you are going to be the designated COVID hospital, because again, like in Pune, we were a bit out of the city in a place called Talegaon. So we were the dedicated COVID hospital, means we were just dumped with patients, poor patients, who nobody knew what to do. They would just dump them in the OPD and disappear. And I had to sit down and tell my postgraduate residents and say, okay, this is a PPE kit, now you practice, and already there are patients admitted in that ward, and we started making timetables. None of us knew what was happening. You can imagine their state. So here, very often, you'll agree with me that we have physical stress, we have psychological stress, in addition to the stress that we put them under in so-called name of teaching, mentoring, whatever. Without standing for a minute in their shoes, and you all know what it meant. I don't know how many of you here wore a PPE, and after 3 or 4 hours just being in the ward, it didn't matter what you did. You felt you were walking in flooded water. And actually some of us ended up wearing diapers just because that was comfortable. And then you wouldn't drink water because that made you uncomfortable. So forget the external trauma, forget the fact that every day an ambulance would leave our hospital with 3 to 4 bodies. There would be people crying and following the government rules of triple wrapping, and just a packet literally comes down of human remains. How do you get anyone to accept those days? And this is the state. The person who is supposed to heal, he is wounded. He is wounded in such a way that he cannot function. And then you have this thing called a post-traumatic stress syndrome or symptoms. So it's a little bit extension of what was commonly called PTSD, and it was quite often associated with the army. Because long after the original incident, you still keep reliving those days and you don't know how to manage. There's physical, there's psychological stress, there are symptoms, and you very often don't know what to do after that. The overwork leads to exhaustion, you feel helpless, you feel frustrated, because you want to do good, you don't have the kits. You want to treat your patient, you don't know what to give. Every day the values are changing, every day the numbers are changing, every day the rules are changing. And then you have a feeling of guilt, whether you like it or not. And then, because you feel trapped, you want to do good, but the situation is not allowing you to do what you would like to do. The patients themselves have different needs. We had a patient very early on in COVID, and he had tested positive. We had put him in the ward, but he was absolutely fine. He didn't even need a ventilation, he just needs paracetamol. And he ended up complaining to the local councillor, saying, no one is looking after me. They are giving me 3 tablets a day, they are not giving me any antibiotics, they are not giving me oxygen, they are not giving me any drip, they are neglecting me. And that ward, of course, was sealed. There was only a phone. And then we called up and said, one patient is complaining that no one is attending to him. What is happening inside? And then those residents told us, sir, he is absolutely fine. Yes, he is in the ward, but there are other patients who are collapsing around him. But how do you tell him that he didn't need treatment? And his treatment was just caring and ensuring that he didn't go out into the public. We didn't know what to do. So it becomes very, very difficult. And your work as a healthcare worker, your work as a physician, all those grand dreams that you have suddenly come crashing down. When you have loss of meaning in your life, when you wonder what all that training you underwent for, those nights that you kept studying, those exams that you passed, to do what? And if this is left untreated, it keeps building up inside, it eats you up like a cancer. And then if it is not treated, if you don't have a support system, you end up in what is called burnout. It's like a wick. We lit a lamp in the morning, and if there's no oil, the cotton will burn itself to nothingness. It's useless to no one. You can add oil later on. It won't work. This is just a small study that I came across, and we can remember this time. Just look at these figures here. Stress, 50% sometimes. Have been anxious, 60%. Sleeplessness, worried, all of us were. Fear. 70% of our healthcare workers have gone through this. These are actual statistics which have been published. So what are the factors that end in this? Because we don't really have a strong support system. We don't really work as a family. Heavy workload, nothing we can do about it. But can we at least support each other? There's very passive coping. Somehow I have to find my own way out. It's my own fears. I don't know whom to go to. And there's emotional and physical exhaustion. So that makes it much, much more difficult. If you're just physically exhausted, like it happens when we do our training, I'm physically exhausted, but mentally I'm charged up because we had a good day. We had everyone here listening to me. So that makes it good. What are the challenges? Some people just want to be diagnosed so that they try and put a label on their problem because you're confused. You don't know why you're feeling that way. Others, if you give them a diagnosis, they feel it's a stigma. They feel, how can I go back to the ward? How can I treat patients when I myself am diagnosed with XYZ as a label? Very often, even in our country, even today, even among the healthcare workers, visiting a psychiatrist is a huge stigma. You wouldn't like to do it, you wouldn't like to go to your colleague. What does that tell you about the care that we are giving? And even this diagnosis itself has a negative impact, I've told. So rather than relieve your stress, it's just increasing. And then what happens when all this is happening within me? I lose my worth as a professional. I can't care anymore. I start making mistakes. Little problems that are there, I may lose my temper. I may just ignore it. Okay, I can't do anymore. I just give up. And all this becomes very contagious because now your students and others are looking at you. So what can we do? Identify it. Look after each other. Try and find out if someone is looking stressed, someone is looking worried, someone is coming in late to work, someone wants to be alone. It's easy to identify because we are supposed to know each other. Prevent. Take precautionary measures, whatever you can. Try and work for better working environment. It can be done. It doesn't need too much of resources. We always feel that. Oh, if I have all the resources, we know we didn't have PPE kits, but still we managed. We didn't have oxygen, but still we managed. We didn't have ventilators, but still we managed. Because the atmosphere was right, we were all willing to help out each other. So even if someone has to work extra hours and you are feeling better on that day, tell them, listen, why don't you take a break? I'll work for an extra 2 hours. And the next day, that situation will be reversed. But we feel good because we are there for each other and have an available session, have available people who are there for counseling. Who are there when you can go and say, listen, I need help. I just want to talk to someone. Without putting a label or going to worry about a diagnosis as such. So have flexible work schedules. Don't go by the box, okay, everyone has to come at 9 and leave at 5. Let them come when they want. Let them work as long as they want. Allow them to decide themselves. As long as they see that the standard of care is there. Sleep, of course. Because even though you may be off, you don't get sleep, you don't get rest because of your mental conditions. The family members are worried. I know my own family, because we were the only ones who were allowed out. I had to drive literally 50 kilometers one way in Pune. The roads were empty, it was fine. But my family every day, and nobody in my society also could tell me anything, because they knew I was a doctor, they saw that sticker. And naturally they were worried, this person is going to a hospital, and they knew it was a designated hospital, but no one could tell me anything. In fact, one police constable one day, a lady that too, I was coming back and she stopped my vehicle and she says, where are you going? I said, I'm a doctor, I had my I card, we had that sticker on the windshield. told me, why are you going back into Pune? Go back to your hospital and stay in your hospital. Literally in this tone. So what do you do? So we need to understand this among each other. Take a break. Have a picnic. And picnic doesn't mean, okay, I need you to get a bus and plan. Just go have some samosa chai and come back. Get people to talk about their work. Let us share our problems. And of course, ensure that your health is in the best that it can be. As healthcare workers, let's realize this. Very often we assume, oh, it's okay, I'm feeling tired, I don't get sleep, all part of the job. So that is happening to XYZ. We don't realize our own symptoms. We feel this is part of the job, this is what I signed up for. I wanted to be a cardiothoracic surgeon, I wanted to work in emergency medicine, so it's fine. Not really. Not really. That fear of stigmatization, talk about it, share. It doesn't have to be a big label or a big diagnosis that was given to me. Very often we feel, oh, this month was tense. Next week will be better. Next month will be better. And we keep pushing it off. Biggest problem, we lack faith in our colleagues or we lack faith in our system. What will my HOD say? What will my MS say? I can't ask for leave. I can't ask to be given early break and say, I just can't do it. I need 2-3 days break. Have a system that allows people to talk. So I'll quickly go through this roadmap. It doesn't need much explaining, but right down from basic needs, getting people engaged, having better relationships. Let them talk about their purpose in life. Let them say, I'm not feeling like a good doctor anymore. What can I do about it? And then we can talk to each other, encourage each other. This feeling of losing your control. Whether we liked it or not, we had to go every day. Because even if we were not working in the COVID ward, our residents were there, our nurses were there, our staff were there. So you can't justify and say, okay, I'm in the administration, so I'm going to take a break. And then you feel you're losing control. Similarly, would be the state with our residents and look after the basic needs. Are they eating on time? Are they sleeping on time? Are they comfortable? Is there a bus to pick them and drop them if they are on leave? Similarly, again, this all helps. Get people to get back their identity. Look after their relationships. Let them be engaged. Why do we only have to talk about work and healing all the time? Give them some free time. Give them an opportunity to just relax and be themselves. And whatever service and support can be given, again, doesn't always have to cost a lot of money. Simple things, but if they are effective, that is good. So very quickly, just let's watch this short video, and it gives us some things that we can actually do. All right. Okay, I'm sorry for that technical glitch, but just in short, if all of us can, if all of us can just work together as a team, what that lady was trying to say is like a clock. There are so many different parts and all need to mesh with each other to get an accurate time and further this thing to go. Go to the PPT. So all of us know this. Together, everyone achieves more. Let this go away from the slide and come back into this auditorium. We either pass or we fail as a group. We either work together or we will lose our team. So what is the future that we should look for? Better solidarity, better understanding of each other's problems. We don't want a utopian heaven sort of a Hindi movie sort of a ending. Suddenly everybody is happy and everybody is laughing, and it won't work. But if we can find value, if we can find meaning in what we are doing, I'm sure that process itself will bring us joy and at least greater peace of mind. So I leave you with this, with best wishes as you move forward. Learn with each other, learn from each other, grow with each other wherever you are. Go ahead, walk with your team, and above all, be there for each other. Thank you for a patient hearing, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you all.
Thank you so much, sir. Just a small announcement. The buses will leave at 4:30 today. Thank you so much, sir. May I now request our Honorable Chairperson to kindly felicitate our Honorable Guest Speaker.
It was a wonderful talk by Professor Colonel Dr. D'Souza. I think after such a lengthy sessions which we had in the morning, and especially after talking about ethics in war, he has brought out a very important dimension to the health care profession, where we have to understand our own self, that's where we are, what we are suffering from, what is that which is hurting us. And COVID-19 has given us this opportunity to realize and understand. And as you have mentioned that post-traumatic stress or burnout has been talked about a lot in past also, and psychologists have been doing or researching a lot of work when they provide therapy to the patients who are coming for their mental health help. So I think the ultimate message which we get, we have to focus on in coordination. For example, when we talk about physical health and mental health, there also we have to be very integrated. We are not supposed to focus either on physical or mental health, as the healthcare workers are also human beings and they have their own scenario or their own responsibilities, etc. So responsibilities bring challenges, and challenges bring the prevention or the way to act or to overcome those sufferings, etc. So although it has been talked about wounded healing, but I think I would rather say that where there is a wound, there is a life. So we have to address that aspect, whether it's a patient or it's a person who is giving solace or treating the other person. So mental health has been in focus, but nowadays, as you have rightly mentioned, that we have to move from illness or focusing on the mental illness, we have to move on to the well-being or the positive aspects, where we talk about social support, resilience, and helping others, connecting with others, and accepting ourselves as we are. So all healthcare workers have to realize that they are genuine, they have really unconditional regard for the patient, and we are always there with the patients with empathy. So that is a message that we have to carry forward while treating or handling our own wounds as well as the patient's wounds. So thank you so much, Dr. D'Souza, for giving us this talk. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I couldn't help saying just a few words. I really enjoyed your talk.
Thank you.
It was very crisp and the message was very loud and clear, and it was very apt for the physicians and other community. So I was just reminded of a book which was written by one of my colleagues, Dr. Ashish Goyal. He's also joined on the group. I just saw his name, and he's going to chair the last session for Dr. Srinivas. He wrote a book on doctors do cry. Very nice book. And when the book was completed, he told me to write a preface to it. And then while I was writing it, I just thought of my own MBBS time, that when I was posted in surgery ward during my third year of MBBS, it was 1974, and one lady, I remember her name, Rafiqan, she had 5 children. She underwent surgery for multinodular goiter, completely curable problem. With surgery, it was planned, and she underwent surgery. We watched the surgery from the galleries, and then she became all right. After that, she recovered from the surgery immediately after that, from anesthesia. And thereafter, the relatives were told that she will be absolutely fine in a week or she will go home. Next morning when we came back, we found that she was dead. What happened? She died because there was excessive bleeding from the wound site, and then the wound was stitched and it suffocated. Of course, there would be definitely some medical negligence, but then it left a lot of scars and wounds on my own psyche. I still cannot forget the emotions which I had at that time, and I felt that what would be happening to her family, what would happen to her children, 5 children. So the doctors do get affected, and then it is sometimes, we as doctors, when we are treating patients, we are going through the wards, we feel that we are not supposed to express our emotions, because if we express our emotions, when people are dying, they are recovering also, but they are dying also. But then when they die, and somebody, when you see dying, especially if he was having curable illness, then you feel extremely bad. Or where you have been treating the patient for a certain length of time, and then suddenly you feel that something happened, the patient died. So this leads to a lot of scars and wounds on the mind of the doctor, and there is a need to heal those wounds also. As Dr. Wahida told, that it is we among ourselves, when we talk to each other, when we express our feelings, then we can heal ourselves. In fact, 4 years back at our institute, we organized a similar workshop, and the title of that workshop was Physician Heal Thyself. Because we don't really take time out to heal ourselves. We don't get physically wounds, but then the mental wounds are there, which are there for the person himself to feel and perceive. So therefore it is very important to heal ourselves. And when we get this kind of thing, if we don't heal ourselves, then there is a situation which comes, it is burnout. So we don't have to allow that to burn out. And even in a day-to-day routine, if we are sitting with our group and just laughing out for 5 minutes, I think that also has a very important psychological let out for us. And it is very important for all of us to smile, laugh, and crack some jokes with each other, and to spend some time only for your own mind and psyche. It's very important. We remember the story when Indira Gandhi, our former Prime Minister, she lost her son, Sanjay Gandhi, in a sudden air crash at Safdarjung Airport. It was so sudden, and that person had ambition to be the future Prime Minister. When he died, she could not tolerate. But at that time and for few days afterwards, she could not utter a single word, and she did not cry at all. But then after a few weeks, what was happening, she was actually not able to control her emotions even at public platforms. So this kind of thing is called stiff upper lip syndrome at the time of grief, because the grief is so severe that you don't even get emotions to cry, and then it results in a postponed grief reaction. So therefore it is very important for us to express ourselves and to heal those wounds before they become deep. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, of course, thank you.
We now
Thank you for
request,
this opportunity. Thank you.
we now
Thank you
request
for this
Vaida Khan ma'am to kindly facilitate the
Thank you, everyone.
speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Moving on to the next lecture, we welcome our chairperson, Dr. 𝐔𝐍𝐄𝐒 sir, Dean, Faculty of Allied Health Sciences. And Professor Dr. 𝐐𝐮𝐢𝐧𝐭 sir, Advisor, SGT University. We are honored to welcome our speaker, Honorable Dr. O.P. Kalra sir, Vice Chancellor, SGT University, Head Bioethics Unit. May we welcome you on the dais, sir.
I'm sure it is not a very pleasant experience to be speaking towards the fag end of the day because everybody is so fatigued that I really won't like to tire out your mind any longer. But then, in fact, when the scientific program was being laid, I told Dr. Russell that I won't like to speak because I should listen to the speakers who are coming as our guests. But then he wanted me to speak on some topic. And since we know that ethics is a very dynamic topic, it changes from period to period, from country to country. And so therefore it is very important for us to know the So it is very important to know, mic baby, scholar mic. Scholar mic, the ethics in the digital era. Now this is again a topic which is not very often covered because we usually keep on talking about the various conventional areas. Now we know that Digital India mission was actually started by the Government of India, Prime Minister's initiative in the year 2015 on 1st of July. And the main aim of this particular mission was to empower our village areas for providing high-speed internet connectivity and to provide digital infrastructure as a source of utility to every citizen and improve governance, and also to make sure that all these schemes of the government, they are able to reach to the last person in the country. But then, although this mission was started in 2015, the progress from 2015 up to the year 2019 or so was somewhat tardy. But then what happened in 2019? The COVID-19 came and it is still with us. We haven't yet got over it. It really served as a catalyst for every change that we are facing today. In the morning, our IMA former president, Dr. Jayalal, he had used the word Russellization. But I was at that time reminded of the term COVIDization. In the last 2 years, COVIDization is a very frequently used term. Everything has got COVIDized. Most of the research that was being done in the last 2 years was focused on finding out new ways and treatment and vaccines for COVID. And the way we lived, the way we taught, the way we studied, the way even we celebrated marriages, and the way even we mourn grief when somebody died. All these things, they were affected very badly by COVID-19. And the most important change which occurred after the healthcare system was in the education sector, because this is very important, and we being the health science university, we are dealing with both healthcare system as well as with the education. So therefore, the nature has to find its own way, and COVID-19 acted as a catalyst for a major change as far as the digital transformation was concerned, it actually served as a catalyst. So at that time, when COVID was there at its peak, this is the picture of that time. And our Prime Minister told that we are in the middle of information era and change was disruptive and big. Achievements of the industrial era are in the rear view mirror, and now we are in the middle of information era or digital era. The future is coming sooner than anticipated. We were not really prepared so much for the digital transformation to take place at such a fast pace. Now, it occurred so fast that we were not able to even make proper legislation for that. Even till date we have not done, though the effort is going on for the last 4 to 5 years. Even the ethical principles and the guiding SOPs have not been put in the final shape. So with Digital India Mission and COVIDization, the things actually have taken on a fast track lane, and we know that our Indian government has the world's largest repository of biometric information, and during the last decade or so, there has been marked increase in the smartphones, and by 2026, it is expected that our country alone is going to have 1 billion smartphone users, and there is going to be a tremendous increase in the consumer digital economy, which is poised for 10-fold rise and in the current decade, and it will reach even up to $800 billion. Now, when something comes up, everything becomes easily accessible, then there is likely to be, and in the absence of proper ethical principles and in the absence of proper legislation, there is a serious risk of criminal activities and unethical activities taking place. So, can you recognize this person? Anybody in the hall? Yes? Very good, very good, very intelligent boys and girls. This is Mark Zuckerberg. He is the co-founder, managing director, chief executive officer of Facebook. And he is facing the parliament because there was a leakage of vital data to the public domain. And for this, he had to sit in front of the parliament and answer very tough questions. And at a stage, the entire thing was going to be closed down. Now, this is a very important information, which I don't know whether you know it or not, but many of you, how many of you are not using smartphone? Raise your hands. I don't expect many hands. So all of you are using smartphone, but you be very careful. What our master surveillance or monitor surveillance is doing, Google and Apple, they track you. And even if your privacy settings are on, and even if you